All I heard at the front of the bus was this booming laugh. He could not stop himself laughing because he'd seen a replay of it and then start going.
I mean, she was 5 foot in the air.
It wasn't great, was it? It was mistimed. There was no intent to it.
Hey, here we are again. I hope you're good. You've had a positive week. This is another brand new episode of Outside the Box, the podcast all about women in sport. I'm Becky Ives, and we're back with my next guest to hang out. We're going to share some stories, offer help and advice to anyone thinking of wanting to get into working in sports. We're going to play a few games because, well, we just love them. And just be super nosy, finding out how my guests have got to where they have today. And today's guest, I feel like she's a lady of many talents. I feel like there's loads that we can chat about here, and she's also probably going red now that I've just said that. Firstly, she's an ex-professional player of the women's game. Then after retirement, she moved into punditry. And if that wasn't enough to keep her busy, she's now producing TV sport shows. So, Alicia Ferguson is here.
Wow, what an intro.
I know.
One of the better ones. Can you always do my intros from just life, please?
Just when you walk in a room?
Yeah, just please. Always.
I can arrange that.
Yeah.
But I knew you'd like that one.
I know. You're spot on with the red as well. As soon as there's any heat or any embarrassment, it's red. Bright red. The complexion, yeah.
Look, thank you so much for coming on today. The reason I wanted to do this podcast is because I really want more women in sport. And I know that is something that you are also super passionate about, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, only from playing the game, but then also moving into the punditry world and then into production. It's been an interesting transition, and it's been, there's been ups and downs, and I'm the same as you, especially now in my role in production. I want to see more women who are producing TV shows, more women who are producing sport, because there's just not enough of us, unfortunately.
And that's what we've got to change. So hopefully this podcast will help that. Let's go back to your playing days, cast your mind back, growing up in Australia. What made you decide that you wanted to play football?
So I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My dad's side of the family is Scottish, so there was a very heavy football influence from that side of the family. They're from outside of Glasgow, a place called Ayr. So there was very heavy Celtic Rangers rivalry within the family. So half of us Celtic, the good half, and the bad half are Rangers.
Half are you? You've just answered.
Yeah. And my brother closest to me played football, and I just used to follow him around, and he used to kick lumps out of me in the backyard. Before school, after school, I couldn't get enough of it. And we'd travel around every weekend when I wasn't old enough to join a team to watch him play in football carnivals when we lived in far north Queensland in Cairns. And I just couldn't wait to join the boys team when I was 6, and it's kind of snowballed from there.
So at what point did you then decide, I'm going to try and be a professional at this? Because that's quite a big leap.
It was pretty young, to be honest. So I was identified to get my first... it was a scholarship at an academy, and I was 13 years old. So it was the Queensland Academy of Sport. And basically, because I was so young, the academy sent me along to a sports psychologist just to make sure that I understood the commitment and what I was up against and whether I could fit that in with my schoolwork and other commitments, and also just being a teenager, which I could, and I loved it. But that commitment was 4 nights a week training and 2 or 3 mornings a week, plus a game on the weekend. So my parents did a lot of kilometres driving me around, early mornings, sitting around waiting for me at training, and late nights, but they just knew that I absolutely loved it, and I'm forever grateful for that.
And incredibly young, at 13, what was the women's game like at 13? How aware were you of the women's game at that time?
Only when I got that scholarship. So I was always playing with boys' teams up until then. And even the first year of that scholarship, I played with the boys on a Saturday and then played with the women on a Sunday. Wow. And I loved it. It was just football. I was football mad. So that was fantastic. But even then, the visibility and the, knowing that there was an Australian women's team, and I wasn't aware of it. So my role models were always male footballers. Favourite player was Dennis Bergkamp. I'm an Arsenal fan, so...
I was going to ask you, was there anyone that you sort of identified with, but no?
Not at that stage. It wasn't probably until I was a little bit older and the likes of the US team came into, the forefront of my mind. But that was only because I had started playing with the academy team, and there was national team players in that team, and it was fantastic. I was a youngster, and all these women were taking me under their wing and were, that's not to say they wouldn't kick the shit out of me, which they did. They appreciated my enthusiasm and they were very nurturing in their support of me, and it was fantastic. I just loved it.
So then when I say to you, you broke into the national team at 15, which is only 2 years after you went and took this scholarship. I mean, there's quick and then there's you.
Yeah, I have no patience.
Yeah.
No, that's it. I'm done. Look, I think in women's football, that happens a lot more. Ellie Carpenter, who's now in our Matildas team and the Australian team, she debuted at the age of 15. So it does tend to happen a lot earlier in the women's game. It was still young, and my first tour with the Aussie team was a 6-week tour of Europe in 1997, and that was a huge eye-opener. Yeah, I mean, it was great because I was missing school and I was travelling around Europe. We went to 9 different countries. I made my debut against Hungary. Went to places like Estonia, which I probably never knew existed as, a 15-year-old from Australia, because Europe was this big, bad, far-away place that you
just never went to. Yeah.
It's like, there's the UK and then everything in Europe, and you didn't really know too much about it. So, I mean, that was absolutely amazing. And that was the tour where I just thought, yeah, this is all I want to do in life.
But the pressure that came with that, do you remember feeling any pressure particularly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the difficulty when you're a young player is you've got the attitude and you've got the enthusiasm, but what you don't have is the maturity or the consistency. So I would have fantastic games, and then the next game I would be absolutely horrendous. And it used to frustrate me no end. But that just comes with experience. At that stage, I was a striker as well, and I ended my career as a holding midfielder. But you don't really know yourself as a player. You don't really know yourself as a person. So it's a very quick maturity trajectory that you've got to take. And sometimes you get it right, and, more times than not, you get it wrong.
And you went on to play 2 World Cups with the Matildas.
Yeah.
How was that to represent your country in the women's game?
It's the proudest thing that I've done in my life, and pulling on the green and gold, it still gives me goosebumps talking about it, singing the national anthem. And the funny thing is, though, when I made the Australian team, as proud as I was to be representing my country, I was just really happy that my parents didn't have to pay for me to travel away. Because now in the national team, because the thousands of dollars that my parents spent on petrol, flights, trips away, and I just thought, oh, this is great. They don't have to pay for me anymore. Wow.
That is such a sweet thought. But parents really are like the driving force behind many young kids that want to get into this, aren't they?
They are. And unfortunately, on the flip side of it, it's also the reason why a lot of women and a lot of young girls actually fall out of the game, especially in places like London, where I was really lucky. My parents were committed, and it wasn't just me. It was my brother or it was my sister, would drive us to all ends of Brisbane and up and down the countryside. But not everyone has that luxury, and it's difficult. And when young girls particularly are having to rely on public transport late at night, early in the morning, you do see a lot of them fall out of the game, and so much talent, I think, is lost that way, and I think it's something that needs to be addressed.
And when you were 13, 14, 15, broken into the squad, what was the women's game like in Australia? Where did you think you would end up? Because you were playing with boys every weekend. So in your brain, were you like, well, I'm going to end up in the male team because I want to play football and that's the opportunity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you know what? I don't even think I had any thought process about that, because when you're a kid, all I wanted to do was play football. And I think there was even a point where I was playing with the boys team, and there was 2 divisions at this club that I was playing with. So the boys team had a Division 1 and a Division 3 in my age group. And clearly I should have been in the Division 1, but for some reason they decided to put me in Division 3 because they didn't think maybe physically I was up to it. Mm-hmm. Yet every weekend I would get called up to actually play in the Division 1 team. And I didn't actually ever realise that was the reason for it until I was a lot older and my parents pointed it out to me. But that's the beauty of innocence, isn't it? You do things on instinct and you do things because you love them, and you don't really think about any of that bias or unconscious bias even any of that prejudice that's being, thrown towards you. And it was great. I just wanted to play, and I didn't know where I wanted to play. I didn't know where I wanted to get to. I just knew all I wanted to do was play football.
And sometimes that's the best thing. You've just got to live in the moment and do it, and not actually worry too much about where you're going to end up. Where's this going to lead? Well, I don't know. I'm just going to take a leap of faith and go and try.
Yeah, it's a bit like playing a game, like a lot of athletes, I think, or footballers, if people ask them about their best moments, they'll either remember the best moments and the really bad moments, but a lot of in between of the detail you don't really remember because you're just going on instinct and you're just in the zone. And that was the same thing. It was just my memories of back then were just playing football, and it wasn't good. They were great memories. There was nothing bad about them.
There was nothing bad about them. Okay, so...
Until.
No, I'm joking.
I digress.
No, right. Throughout this podcast, Eesh, we're getting everybody to play some games just because I'm creating a leaderboard. It's very high class. It's a piece of paper and a pen. Jules Breach is leading at the minute. I think there's Phil, Neville, and then Grace coming in as well. So we'll play 3 games and you have to collectively gather points as we go along. We'll add them all up at the end.
Is this you trying to promote for a new game show? Is this why you're playing games in it, Becky? We're going to do the next Chase, the version of the Chase.
I need to branch out with the TV presenting, so this is where we're going. But first up, we are going to play you a YouTube clip for 5 points, right? I'm judging your explanation by points here.
Okay.
Just tell me about it. Thoughts, feelings, emotions. I think you know what's coming, don't you?
I know what's coming. I think I'm going to get the 5 points.
Take a look at this.
It's a red card, would you believe? An early red card for Alicia Ferguson of Australia, who went stamping in. And Sandy Hunt
got the ball.
our American
Absolutely
referee,
got the ball, referee.
Alicia Ferguson,
Yeah, God, it was so hot that day. It was...
World Cup match.
Yeah, it was, minute 48 that was.
I think that is my favourite clip. And I love how you can talk about this now.
I mean, I still think I got sent off for my mahogany bangs because that fringe was absolutely horrendous. 16-year-old, New York Giants Stadium, and I blame my mum for that fringe as well, actually, to be fair. Yeah,
is that what happened? Was the fringe just slightly too far down your eyes?
Well, no, it was like the McDonald's M's. It wasn't anywhere near. I've got 2 cowlicks on my forehead. I can't even use that as an excuse. Yeah, so 99 World Cup, my first World Cup. I'd moved to Canberra the year before. Yeah, 98 when I was 16. And I was one of the squad players going along to that World Cup. I was a youngster. I was a striker there, which you could probably tell from that tackle. That's definitely a striker's tackle. Very like Paul Scholes-y,
It was fully committed, is what I'll say.
It was committed, yeah. So So I was 16. It was New York Giants Stadium, 30,000, 40,000 people. I hadn't played a single minute of our first 2 games in that World Cup. This was our final game against China. They went on to play against the US in one of the most epic women's football finals in the world. And for some reason, and I still don't know why, Greg Brown, the coach, decided that I was going to start against one of the best teams in the world. And
how did you feel about that when you found that out? Bearing in mind you hadn't played at all in this tournament.
Surprised, proud, terrified, all of the above. I didn't really sleep the night before. I was really nervous, and whenever we played China, technically and tactically, they were ahead of us back then at that stage. So we always wanted to try and impose ourselves on them physically, which will probably make you chuckle based on that tackle. And Brownie just gave us a really big G up. And I remember the changing rooms at New York Giants Stadium. They are bloody huge. They're like the size of a mansion because there's so much space. Telephones in them and everything. But anyway, so Brownie was giving us a really big G up. Really need to get stuck in. Nice early tackles, win the ball. And...
You took that just literally.
Took it literally straight into there. But I was nearly crying in the warm-up. I was very emotional. I was overly emotional. And... It was also FIFA Fair Play Day, which I don't think helped with Sandy, the referee, making the decision to give me a straight red. So I made the tackle and I thought, I'm definitely not as quick as I thought I was. I thought I was quicker then. And then all I heard was Sandy, as I was pulling my sock up, say, "You're off." And I thought, that's a bit much. And there's a photo of me somewhere with looking up at her and she's got the red card. And then all I thought, and I looked up at the big screen and saw the time and went, that's not long in. That's not much.
Yeah, I was going to say, I haven't barely broken a sweat. Yeah.
And then all I thought was, don't cry until you get off the field. Just don't start crying until you get off the field. And then I got off the field and I didn't stop crying until the end of the game.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was so embarrassed, angry, disappointed.
Yeah,
everything basically. And
did Brownie say anything to you?
No, well, after the game, funnily enough, so they had to, I mean, I was doing all sorts in the changing room. They actually sent in the sports psychologist to make sure I was okay.